Good morning, good morning, good morning, good Wednesday morning. It is Dr. Dow, the prevention advocate. And yes, I'm here today with this week's midweek mentoring moment that is about being blind to dysfunction. And so this is our first time back since Friday. And so I hope that you had an awesome resurrection weekend. I hope this week is off to a very, very good start. It is midweek. And so, and if it hasn't been off to a good start, you've been, greeted with some challenges and, some obstacles, excuse me. I want you to be encouraged to do the work, right? Do some of the things that we talk about all the time. Take time to assess, give things a thorough overview before you make decisions, not being impulsive, not being anxious, and also bearing graciously with yourself. Okay. And so let's dig into it. Okay. And so asking yourself a question today: are you blinded by dysfunction? And so dysfunction is definitely a word that we hear a lot about. It's a buzzword, it's a trend word. But let's talk about it. And because it means a lot of things, it comes with a lot of factors, a lot of features, a lot of variables. It can be unpacked in multiple ways, right? But today I'm gonna talk about it in this way, in this context, about being mindful of not calling dysfunction something that is not, right? And a lot of times that can look like things that we make excuses for, right? And so when we are conditioned, we are groomed, be it, your upbringing, be it, later on in life, a lot of times, when things are being called out, right? And we get a little offended by, a little irritated by it. It may actually not be, something that is wrong with what's being confronted, but it may be the fact that you have some way, in some capacity, been blinded by dysfunction. And so dysfunction is anything that produces disorder, right? Things that are not normal. Okay. And so we do live in a time where this is still an issue. Nothing new under the sun. It's always been since the beginning of mankind that there are things that are dysfunctional. Things tend to get out of order. Things tend to get messy and muddy, right? But we are supposed to hone, the capacity and the ability to, actually spot it, right? And resolve. Okay. And so dysfunction, again, is something that we have to continue to work, to resolve it. It is something that we should not become conditioned to, accustomed to, and again, make excuses for. Sometimes confronting it can be very, very challenging, right? Especially if it's something that you have seen going on for years and years. And again, you just, have said, hey, but this is how we do it. This is how it's always been done. It don't make it right, right? It don't make it correct. And a lot of times, we feel as though things sneak up on us. And a lot of times things don't really sneak up on us. It's really, we've become blinded. We become, distracted by so many other things that we have not focused on some things that, causes the dysfunction, and where the dysfunction lies, and where it has been rooted, right? And so doing all this, it takes work, right? You have to do the work, you have to put in the effort, you have to be consistent, you have to be willing, right? Because things don't change if you don't take action. And so you have to be the one to say, hey, no, let's take another look at this. This is not normal, right? And I'm gonna just say it. And so things like, you constantly being taking on other people's faults, things, you taking care of other people's burdens, right? When you constantly, have to like mute yourself for others to be comfortable, when you're constantly walking on eggshells, when you constantly, become like, this constant think tank, you're the one that constantly takes on the brunt and the consequences of someone else's actions. Okay. That's dysfunction. And so let's talk about some interpersonal dysfunction when you constantly, minimize yourself, put yourself in this box. When you constantly, struggle with self-determination, self-esteem, and self-confidence, likely because of what somebody said or what somebody done, right? And it don't necessarily mean that it was true. Or if it was true and you have not, done the work to, be honest with yourself about some things and to overcome and work towards change. Now you have these dysfunctional, thinking patterns, right? That eventually turns into dysfunctional behaviors. Okay. And so, like I said, this is a vast subject and it can be unpacked in a lot of ways. But today, again, I want you to just, look over some things, take some time to reflect and ask yourself, is there anything that really, really, really is going on in your life? That could be possibly on constant replay, right? Or it can be something that is constantly, taking you to a place and a space that's not so bright and vibrant, right? Right? It's in the way of a better future, right? Does it constantly cause any type of apprehension, things that are nail biting, things are just, things that just make you want to withdraw and retreat? Okay. Or is it anything that's going on that just really rubs you the wrong way? Right? You easily triggered and you ready to go off. You stay locked, you stay loaded. You got this idea anybody can get it. Could it be because somewhere along the line you have become blinded by dysfunction? Okay. And again, by default. Okay. That's why it's good to keep good company. That's why it's good to give relationships an overview. These are a lot of the things that over the last couple of weeks I've talked about in mentor moments, midweek mentor, excuse me, during a few of the midweek mentor moments over the last week, and even with the acknowledged nuggets. This is why, you have to consider your whole person, your whole man, and not just cherry pick and nitpick, little things. It's really working on the you, right? The authentic version of you, from the inside out. And again, that takes work, it takes effort, it takes endurance. Okay. And I'm not ever going to tell you things are easy. No, because sometimes, again, confronting things that have been conditioned and groomed for years, it takes some time to undo, but I'm a witness. I've seen some people, can change things instantly. It's like literally, but I've also seen it even in my own life where some things gradually took time. And so today I want you to be encouraged, to be honest with yourself about anything going on again in your life, something that sticks out the most where you have been constantly blinded by dysfunction, and it's by default, right? Is because it's something that has been the norm. But just because it's been the norm doesn't make it right, doesn't make it normal, doesn't make it productive, doesn't make it prosperous, doesn't make it meaningful, doesn't make it fulfilling. Okay. And so a lot of time, again, dysfunction is a lot of things that become a norm, because people just say, oh, that's how it is, or that's just how so and so is, or we all, that's just how it goes. No, that don't make it right. And if it's weighing you down, right? And if it's doing any of the things that I just talked about, if it constantly has you just in this negative space, right? When you constantly distracted by it, if it breaks your concentration, if it is something that constantly causes you to, lose focus on the things that are priority and what's important, again, it could be due to some form of dysfunction. And again, this is something that it is a trend and we don't like to talk about, but sometimes our thinking patterns and sometimes our behavior patterns are dysfunctional. Okay. And so I think this again is a good time. It's still spring cleanup. It's a good time to go over some things, to do some self reflection, to really, really sit and do some internal inventory and do some work about anything that you could, again, be having going on in your life and in your affairs, even in your relationships that are dysfunctional. And some way, somehow, you've been blind to it. Okay. That's why it's so important to keep your emotions in check. That's why it's so important to do man in the mirror checks, right? That's why it's so important to acknowledge and call things what they are, right? Give it a name, right? Acknowledge for what it is and put it in its proper place and in proper perspective. These are literally strategies and techniques to keep you from being blinded to dysfunction, and then not saying things just sneak up on you. Okay. Because a lot of things that we tend to say, it just sneak up on me. It came out of nowhere. No, it really did. It's because your focus was on something else that you hadn't spent enough time prioritizing and being focused on what you should be focused on. And a lot of times it is because we ignore the warning signs. Okay. That's a lot of times how dysfunction creeps in. All right. And so pay attention. All right. Pay attention. Pay attention to your internal warning signs. And again, this don't mean being impulsive. This don't mean taking things and running off with it. No, this means taking time to assess things, to think things over before you react, right? So you can give things a response and an answer instead of a chaotic reaction or an impulsive reaction. Okay. And so be mindful. Those are some things that, just to be mindful of as you take, again, a self inventory on this subject. You know, just asking yourself, am I being blinded by dysfunction? And it's by default. And it's because of something that has become so normal and routine, and I make excuses for it. Okay. Hey, that's it for today. All right. That's this week's midweek mentoring moment. And I hope it's helpful. I hope it's durable. I hope these things that I am sharing are things that you all are able to apply to the things that's most important to you in your life. I hope you're making self priority, right? That doesn't mean being selfish, because I don't promote that. I don't promote egotism and I don't promote selfishness, but I do promote that you have to do work on yourself. I do am an advocate, as you know, of personal development and character development. Okay. And so a lot of times, it starts with self reflection. Okay. Until Friday, have yourself a good and awesome day. Again, you can always reach me and my team at drdowconsults.com. Any questions, any inquiries? Yep, drop us a note there. Also, be sure to look over the this week's subject comments in the comment section. Um, a lot of times I leave a summarization of what I'm talking about, what these mentoring moments are, and hope that this is something that helps you go a little bit deeper. Also, it helps you encourage you to do the work. Okay? Until next time, chat soon and peace.